It's all your birthday presents.
my wheelchair.
Happy appearance day, Kartikeya.
Thank you, yes.
Okay, next time, 1 year from now, get up and roll him across, please.
Well, that won't be just charity. My crush.
Okay, Geeta Dhyanam. Om. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. And the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, and the crippled cross mountains. Harium Tat Sat. Okay. Devotion. Oops. So now moving, in the that second that we've been with the past couple of days, second shloka can be said to be applied whether worshipping as manifest or unmanifest, but certainly it applies as manifest. And now we move to unmanifest. We remember the question, right? Which is better?
Yeah, better.
Manifest or unmanifest? Okay. So, those who worship the imperishable, the indefinable, the unmanifest, the omnipresent, the immovable, and the eternal, having restrained all the senses, even-minded everywhere, rejoicing ever in the welfare of all beings, verily they also come unto me. So why rejoicing in the welfare of all beings? All beings are the one. Thank you. And if we're chosen to relate to the Absolute as the unmanifest, then all beings are within the one or of the one, right? Okay. Here's the word for word. And this translation given by Swami Chinmayananda is a literal translation. The order of it would have been changed a little bit for readability. And here we go. Oops. Sorry, we're homing in on it. Okay. There's the question. So this is the word-for-word translation from Sanskrit. Who, verily, the imperishable, the indefinable, the unmanifested, worship the omnipresent, the unthinkable, and the unchangeable, the immovable, the eternal. And then the fourth, which we've just covered, having restrained the aggregate of the senses everywhere, even-minded, they obtain me only in the welfare of all beings, rejoicers. Okay. So, a little bit of commentary here. What Swami Chinmayananda does in his commentaries, he'll break down the word for word and talk about the words, which is the classical way of teaching of Vedanta. So just a little about each one. And he gives the Sanskrit words for each one of them that are being described. So imperishable is akshara. All that have forms and qualities are substances, and all substances are perishable. The imperishable is therefore that which has no qualities. Qualities alone can be perceived, and it implies that it's impossible for the sense organs to perceive the imperishable. So, indefinable, and that's arnirdesham. Definitions are always in terms of what is perceived, and when a thing is imperceptible naturally, it cannot be defined and distinguished from other things. Makes sense, right? All-pervading, sarvatrigam, the infinite has no qualities. It is even nirguna, so beyond the three gunas. That is not manifest. That which is, therefore, indefinable should necessarily be all-pervading and existing everywhere. If the Supreme can be indicated as not existing at any place, then the Supreme will have a particular shape, and that which has a shape will perish. Unthinkable. Achintyam. That which can be conceived of by a human mind will immediately become the object of feelings and thoughts, and since all objects are perishable, the imperishable must necessarily be inconceivable, incomprehensible, and unthinkable. Unchanging. Kutashtaha. The self, the consciousness, remains unchanged even though it is the substratum on which all changes constantly take place. Kuta, in Sanskrit, is an anvil. Just as the iron block in a smithy's workshop, without itself undergoing any change, allows other pieces of iron to be beaten out on it and changed into any shape, so too the consciousness allows our personalities to grow well or ill in contact with it, and it's not changed. So we've been discussing all of these concepts, right? And these, when we started this, if we remember the three groups of 6 of the chapters. So first one's discussing thou, you, and the next discussing that, so the nature of the absolute. So we've been in this for a while. So all of these concepts we've covered. And now again, Lord Krishna, and this is Lord Krishna speaking, laying out how to worship the unmanifest, if one is to do this. Okay. Immovable. Achalam. Motion is change in the time-space system. And lovely that he includes time as a dimension, right? So motion is change in the time-space system. A thing can never move in itself. It can do so only to a point in space and time where it is not already. Here, now, I remain in my chair. He gives this example. I can move to another place to occupy it in the coming minute. But here and now, in my own chair, I cannot move in myself, since I pervade the whole of me. The infinite is all-pervading, and there is no point in space or time where it is not. and therefore the infinite cannot move. It is here, there, everywhere. It has the past, the present, and the future in it. In it. Eternal. Dhruvam. That which has change is a thing that is conditioned by time and space, but the supreme, the substratum of all at all times and in all places, is the one that supports the very play of time and space, and therefore these two factors cannot condition the infinite. Consciousness, which is the infinite self in us, is the same everywhere and at all times. In our childhood, youth, and old age, in all places and at all times, and in all conditions, whether joy or sorrow, or success or failure. It is only when we come down to the levels of our intellect, our mind, and our body that we step into Einstein's world with its relativity theory in play, in the play of time and space. The Supreme is unconditioned by time. It is the ruler of time. It is eternal. And then he adds, we must note that all these terms used here are expressions borrowed from our Upanishads to indicate that which provides the eternal substratum for the ever-changing universe of names and forms, behaviors and happenings, perceptions and feelings, thoughts and expressions. Meditation upon the Lord symbolized in the form, key point, just in terms of our relating, demands three unavoidable conditions, and then that's the next shloka, that's number 5, and he had included the two of them together. Having restrained all the senses. So he's speaking about the necessary considerations in order to worship the unmanifest, right? So first we have to find a way of relating to it. Which we can say beyond all. Having restrained all the senses, to dissipate our energies through the sense organs is he includes, vulgar hobby of the thoughtless mortal. A seeker who is aspiring to reach the summit of perfection and rule over the state of deathless joy must necessarily curtail such dissipations and redirect the energies so conserved for the higher flight. The sense organs are the real gateways through which the disturbing world of plurality steal in to storm our inner bosom and plunge us into destruction. It is again through the organs of action that the mind gushes out into the world of objects. These two transactions break up our harmonious equipoise and steady balance. Krishna rightly emphasizes here that if a meditator is to succeed in the path of meditation, he must cultivate a habit of living with his senses in control. You see, he's talking about Raja Yoga here, yes? Always equanimous. That's the second of the conditions. For a successful meditator is his intellectual equanimity in all conditions and experiences. He says it's very foolish indeed for a thinker to hope for a condition in life. Does that make sense? Any condition. To hope for any condition in life. It's foolhardy, yes? Why?
Setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw you off. Oh. Wherein no disturbance from the outer world can reach him to distract his meditation. Such a perfect condition is impossible. The things of the world in themselves and in their patterns keep on changing, etc. He says the intelligent relationship maintained by a seeker towards the world outside, whereby he experiences a uniform steadiness in himself, in spite of the mad revelry of things and beings around him, is called the condition of equanimity. And he says this capacity is called sama buddhi. We know, right? Sama. That's Rama. Ramananda saying sama all the time. Even getting tossed everywhere. Sama. So sama meaning balanced, same, undisturbed, steady. Buddhi, intellect. And then he gives an example. He says, my child may be dirty at one moment, mischievous at another, screaming in the morning, laughing in the noon, bullying in the evening, and wild at night. Yet through all such conditions, the Father in me sees but one and the same Son. Therefore, I give my love equally in all these different manifestations of my own Son. This is a loving Father's samabuddhi. In the same way, a true seeker learns to recognize the Lord of his heart in the grim tragedies, in the pleasant comedies, in the tremendous successes, in the sighing sorrows, and in the disappointing failures in his own day-to-day life. Therefore, he becomes equanimous intellectually. And it's to be noted again that this is not something done for us, as it were. Really, it is, but we're the ones that have to practice it. So, we ask for the seeing. And it's fine, when we ask for seeing, at some point you'll be given a vision. Or you'll be given a vision, but then it goes. Right? So, that means in order to hold it, it has to be held in the intellect, samabuddhi, equanimous. We have to see it in every moment. It's the same as what we were talking about in Upanishad the last 2 times. Last Tuesday and then just Thursday. Again, the one way of seeing that's undisturbed is to see in the intellect. So that's the opportunity given in this human birth. And the one who has learned to see and see the same underlier in every situation. Somebody says, oh, how wonderful you are, what a great meal you cooked. And somebody says, this is junk. To see the same underlier, the same absolute in both circumstances. Samabuddhi.
As Goenka drilled in our heads.
Yes.
Observe and don't react.
Observe and don't react. There you go.
Anicca.
Criticism or...
Well, and here, this is a question of worship. Remember, so it's not just don't react, but the bhava needs to be there, undisturbed. Right. So it's not an easy path. And this Lord Krishna will speak to here in just a moment. It's not an easy path, but this is the path if we're to worship the unmanifest. And then finally, intent on the welfare of all beings is the third qualification. And why? We covered it. Right? We covered it. Intent on the welfare of all beings. So that's the bhava. That's the attitude. Because if we're to worship the Lord as the unmanifest, then every situation, every being will have to find it there. Him, she, it. And in the unmanifest, it even describes a thing. So, like this. Enumerating the third of the qualifications necessary for a successful meditator, the Lord says that he should be ever self-dedicated in serving at his best all beings. It's impossible for anyone, as long as he's in this embodiment, to give all his mind and intellect at all times towards the higher contemplation. He must necessarily come in contact with the world and react to it. In all such activities, A seeker should be, by the very nature of his philosophy, one who is ever devoted in tirelessly serving the entire living kingdom. Love for all becomes his creed. Love all, serve all becomes his creed.
So, did he just say it's impossible all the time?
No. He said it's impossible for reactions and such not to happen.
Okay.
But in spite of that, one has to remain steadfast. Don't confuse inner and outer. Reaction is outer. But the bhava can be retained.
Is it like saying the mind can be disturbed, but I am not disturbed because I'm not the mind?
But also there's are buddhi and are the intellect or the conscious mind and the subconscious mind the same, Hari? Are they the same?
The conscious
Mind and subconscious mind, are they the same?
Not the same.
Do they function the same?
No.
Okay. So can you see that you can have samabuddhi even when there's pain experienced and when there's a reaction bubbling up to the pain? Can you see it?
Yeah, there can be like a layer of wisdom behind that.
Yeah. So it's firmness in the intellect, firmness and undisturbed nature in the intellect, even when somebody's screaming, and it might be your own subconscious mind that's screaming.
Yeah.
Really it is.
Right.
When there's a scream of pain inside, that's your own subconscious mind, right?
Yeah.
And the reaction, the desire to run away from it is your own subconscious mind. But the firmness not to run away and to see what's there is your conscious mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what's being discussed. Firmness in the conscious mind.
Gotcha.
So, Thus, if meditators fixing their mind upon the imperishable, the unmanifest, are able to control their sense organs, keep themselves equanimous, and make it their nature to serve others, they too reach me alone, which was the statement that Lord Krishna was making. Krishna declares that they too reach the same goal, the Supreme Self. And Swamiji adds a little commentary here about the question. He says, the question is raised by Arjuna is rather of a controversial nature, while Krishna's answer to it is a declaration of an incontrovertible truth. So the question that Arjuna asked, if we go about amongst the religious figures in the world, generally speaking, the one exception would be one who's transcended. But even then, depending upon the role that they're playing, would the Zen master say something other than Zen as the way to the absolute, to merge with the absolute? So there's controversy, right? Different people would answer Arjuna's question different ways. Some would say, worship in form. Generally speaking, we were talking about Christianity and Islam the other day, right? Generally speaking, the ministers, the priests, the nuns in the Christian tradition, Catholic tradition, the other Christian traditions would say you have to worship in form, right? Generally speaking, that'll be said. Not always, generally speaking. Generally speaking, in the Islam tradition, for anyone that has experience with it, we would know that we would be told, absolutely do not worship in form, worship the formless. Allah doesn't mean somebody on a cross. Allah is the Father, like that, or Brahman. So no intermediaries. In Islam, no intermediaries. worship the formless, and going through, among other people, even in the meditators, the yogis, the practitioners, right? If you just surf our own communities, and we have so many people in our extended Sangha, right? And generally speaking, everyone would say, do this. This is what works for me. Do this, try this. So the question is very controversial. It's a good way to start a fight. But the way that Lord Krishna is answering, this is why we're reveling in these 9 shlokas that are beginning this chapter, because what he's sharing, what Lord Krishna shares, is incontrovertible. And in other words, he's giving the practices depending upon which relationship you're establishing. He's giving the way to do it. And he's saying in both ways, you reach me. Okay. But, there's a but, and that's number 5. There's a but. And even Swami Chinmayananda introduces it with but. Generally speaking, to the majority, the Lord adds, greater is the trouble whose minds are set on the unmanifest. For the goal, the unmanifest, is very hard for the embodied to reach. And we'll pick up tomorrow morning there and discuss that and discuss why. And we should have a discussion about it.
Can you read that again?
Yep. Greater is the trouble whose minds are set on the unmanifest. For the goal, the unmanifest, is very hard for the embodied to reach. In a nutshell, and we come back and discuss more tomorrow morning, in a nutshell, what are we using in order to relate to manifest or unmanifest? We're using the manifest to relate to manifest or unmanifest. But the manifest can't relate to unmanifest. So generally speaking, that's more troublesome. That's harder. This is what Lord Krishna is suggesting. And we'll discuss more, but...
And it seems we can try to convince ourselves.
Yes.
And then we trick ourselves and we think we're somewhere that we're not if we try to skip steps.
It's a very tricky approach. Because look and see the way the mind works, and even at its best, even when it's not in a disturbed state, even when there's some sama there, some equanimity there, still it's dealing in concepts. What concept to use for that which cannot be described? And so we come back to, but this is the challenge. This is the challenge. So, but he gives the way to do it. He does give the way to do it. That was those last 2. But now he's saying, but, there's a but. And so we'll explore that more in the morning.
So completely non-reactive mind full of Baba.
Yes.
In every moment.
Yes. Yes.
I was trying to think about God is trying to experience everything. So even if people are doing horrible things to other people, I'm like, well, that's God experiencing everything.
You know, a good example of the Zen master, generally speaking, is relating to the unmanifest in the practice. And so,
also in the yogic tradition, the Brahma Kumaris, they have like no altar, and they don't worship any form.
Very good.
Like a poster of like a shining sun, a bright light,
very good.
something like that.
Very good. Yes.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, we know them, in fact. But in fact, it's not exactly true, because they have Baba's photos all around. And that's their way. That's their path. They worship Brahma through Baba, even though they would say not. Why? Because the mind goes to a crutch in order to, and it's almost as if it has to. I mean, certainly it has to in order to get to the point where it can let go of it. Right? So, even so, there's a requirement for teaching and a teacher. Oh, but yeah,
I don't know
that's
if
true.
you heard the Adyashanti story.
What's that?
But, so Adyashanti is a teacher. He
Yes, I know of him.
studied Zen Buddhism for like 15, 20 years.
Yes,
And he tried doing that, the unmanifested path.
yes.
And then at some point he finally gave up the whole thing. And that's when he got his realization. And what was his first realization? He woke up and he looked at the form, realized, well, that's God. So he goes in the mirror, that's God. And he goes around and such. Once he dropped his...
It's Peace Pilgrim.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, there you go. That's it.
So maybe right in the middle of these pictures, we could just put a bright light. Picture of a bright light right
Oh, okay. Let's close with final prayers in RT. Page 174. Om. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukmeva Bandhanam Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukmeva Bandhanam Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukmeva Bandhanam Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyanto Makashi Dukhabhag Bhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Mahamritam Gamaya Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudashyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Universal prayer. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. On below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all the saints and sages of all the traditions.
now.